Okay, let's talk about wood for a second. The first thing we need to do in the yurt wall building process is to take our lumber and cut it down to size. So I use 6 foot 6 inches as my base measurement for my yurt wall slats. This gives me an internal wall height of 6 feet around the circumference of the yurt. I find this is about right. You can do it shorter and longer depending on what you're going for, but this is what I like. So I'm measuring out the extra little bit and we're going to cut it. Carry on. Okay, let's talk about wood for a second. I'm using kiln drying spruce or pine, whatever's available. This is cut. I want them at 7 foot 6 inches. That's my standard length for most of my yurt builds. It can vary depending on how high you want your internal walls. You can make it longer. If you want a shorter, more stout yurt, you can make those poles, slats, shorter. So it does depend on your preference, your location, the purpose of your yurt, maybe how tall you are and how comfortable you want to feel inside the yurt itself. So this is the method I use for most of my yurts. It's a blend between traditional and modern style. I take 2x6 kiln drying. I'll cut them to the length that I need them, so in this case 7 foot 6 inches. Then I'm going to mark off individually 12-inch spacing, and that's where I'll drill my initial holes, my holes for the slats. You can change that a little bit if you want. All the dimensions, sizes, scale, everything on the yurt can be modified, changed, made to kind of custom suit your purpose. So these are the dimensions, these are the measurements that I've personally found to work best for me in my yurt building. And so you can experiment, you can try, you can use these. These are gonna work for sure, but depending on your purpose, you might want to try something different. So I do my holes at 12-inch spacing. I'm going to mark that on here and I'm going to drill them. I do a 3-inch offset from the top and a 3-inch offset from the bottom, and then it's all 12-inch spacing from there. When purchasing, if you're going this route, there are a few considerations to make. One, like any purchase of kiln drying lumber at your local lumber yard, you want to take a look at the bow of the wood. If it's warped, you want it relatively straight for the purposes that you're doing. A little bit of bow and a little bit of bending and stuff like that isn't the end of the world. If that's what you have, it can be worked with. The yurt is very forgiving, but if you're able to choose yourself, if you're able to pick it off the shelf, then I would take a look. Absolutely, make sure that you can get as straight a lumber as you can. Another consideration is the knots. So there are all kinds of knots in lumber. If you can get the least amount of knots, the better. What you have to consider is once the holes are drilled through, we're gonna rip these slats, and we'll probably get 6, maybe 7 slats per 2x6, depending on how you do it. So this one's a relatively good one. There's no knot going all the way through. What would happen if a knot's going all the way through is you're gonna lose every piece. You're gonna have a big hole. It's gonna be a structural issue. The slats themselves are gonna be weakened by that. So let's see if I can find a bad example. When I choose my lumber, it's something I'm mindful of when I'm picking, that I don't have anything like that. You know, like this is another example of a very good one. We have some that'll run through it, but those ultimately should not affect the slats. You're gonna lose potentially a couple slats per 2x6, no matter what happens. Maybe you've cut them too thin, maybe there is just a knot that you don't see that weakens. We're gonna cover that when we get to the wall building and the slat tying portion of the videos. Let's see, so for example, you know, this slat, that's gonna end up being the last slat of this, we'll end up losing. This here, it's gonna cut through, this is gonna be a really weak point, and we're gonna lose this slat. But slats that are lost that way are still usable. So we need shorter slats in the ends of the yurt walls. And again, we'll talk about that in the slat tying video, but save those. They're not lost cause, and you can recover them. We will use them in other parts of the yurt building process. There is a lot of forgiveness given in the yurt building process. So being off a few millimeters, being off a little bit is not the end of the world. In fact, when you're drilling them, if you're doing it this way, you're gonna end up with a little bit of wobble in the holes. You're not gonna get it perfect. A human is not a drill press, so there is gonna be human error in it. But that's the nature of the yurt. This is the beauty of a yurt. It's not a manufactured, it doesn't come out of a factory. Every hole isn't perfect, smooth, aligned. Every piece isn't built. That's what gives it its characteristics. That's what gives it its beauty, and at least that's what I feel, at least, right? It's a natural. It's something that humans have been building for centuries, for thousands of years, in fact, and it's hand built, which means that there is a little bit of character to it. That each one is a little different and unique, and that's why it is forgiving. We want 3 inches off the bottom. And then we are spaced 12 inches, which means 15 at 27, at 39, at 51, at 63, at 75, and at 78. Perfect. I found this is the easiest time saving method. Lots of holes. Many holes. Once all our holes have been drilled, we're going to proceed to ripping our slats. I'll use a table saw. I set approximately 3/4 of an inch, but it does vary from yurt to yurt, from build to build. I proceed to rip each slat on the table saw, and I believe I was getting 6 slats per 2x6 or 5.5 inch true width. If you have a friend or somebody who can give you a hand with this, it makes it a little easier. It is doable with one person. You just have to flip the wood kind of halfway through, otherwise it becomes a little dangerous. So you're going to take and you're going to rip all your slats, and once all your slats have been ripped, then you can begin your wall building process. But it's good to have a base done in a pile, that way you can finish this process. It is rather quick to do, and the rest of the process of the yurt is fairly time consuming and repetitive. So to get this out of the way is nice. So that concludes the slat ripping process. It's fairly straightforward, and you can rip quite a few slats by yourself in a very short period of time, which includes the drillings of the holes and the ripping of the slats. And then you can proceed to the yurt wall tying process, which in itself is quite the process. So that's what our next video will cover as we begin tying the yurt walls for a 20-foot diameter yurt. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.